Jesus is alive. We don't serve a God from a book. We don't serve a God that doesn't exist anymore. He's here with us and resides in our life and works in our life. That's kind of an overwhelming feeling I felt today. We're going to kind of pick up our study today from Solomon. And I tell you, I really tried to stick to the book, but I just could not get past the temple. So we're going to kind of go a little bit farther on that, and that'll give the next person a lot of license to kind of go where they want to go. But with the foundation, so we're going to kind of pick up our study from Solomon, like we did last week. With the foundation that David created, his father, the reign of Solomon was a golden age for Israel. Solomon's wisdom brought great wealth to Israel. His greatest achievement being the building of the first temple. The temple was a focal point of worship. It was at the seat of power in Jerusalem, overlaid by pure gold, golden altar of incense, golden lampstands, tables of showbread, massive bronze pillars, which if you read in the Bible, it's by craftsmen from the city of Tyre. Hiram, the king, donated a lot of the materials for the temple, and he provided his craftsmen. So we have this great edifice, this building, and there's an artist rendition. If you got that picture there, kind of an idea. You know what's interesting that I didn't think about when I look at this picture, there's no windows in the temple. So the light that was in this room was from the candlesticks and obviously from the glory of God. But that is kind of an artist rendition of what the temple would have looked like. It would have been a sight to see. And the Bible records that when the Queen of Sheba saw the temple, it took her breath away. She was breathless. And I know when I read the Bible, I look at it from a very narrow point of view that this is just Israel. Only Israel exists in the world. But really, when you put it in context to that world, as great as the Temple of Solomon was, there were greater structures in this time. We have the Great Pyramid of Giza, which we look at it now and we see kind of a bunch of rocks in this the great building there. But when the pyramid was built, it was limestone. So that's what you're seeing is kind of the core of that pyramid. But really, if you looked at it in ancient eyes, it would be a white limestone, and it would gleam with the sun. It would reflect the sun. So really, if you look at it, it would be just this tall white pyramid building that reflected the sunlight, and it was just this very large and larger than life structure. The ziggurat of Ur, so that would still exist in this time. So, when you look at this and you see this building, we look at it as a great structure, and it definitely was. But, when you look at it and you try and play status games, there's always someone bigger. There's always someone richer. There's always something that's bigger than what you have. But there was one thing that Solomon's temple had that the other buildings didn't have. And it wasn't great from the gold. It wasn't great from the status of what it was. What made it great was what it had inside of it. It housed the Ark of the Covenant. Now, this was a literal representation of the Spirit of God. There is an interesting interaction between David and God through Nathan. And I feel like I might be in a minority reading of this, but this is kind of the way I see it. David says to the effect that it's not fair that I live in a palace in the house of God, in a house of cedar, but God remains in a tent. And so, of course, David, this was a man after God's own heart. And I feel that it comes from a good place. He wanted to honor God. He wanted to put God in an exalted place. He himself lived in this palace, and he himself lived in this, but yet the God was in a tent. And God speaks to Nathan in 2 Samuel 7, 5 through 7. And this is God speaking to Nathan. Go and tell my servant David, thus saith the Lord, shalt thou build me a house for me to dwell in? Another translation says, should you build me a house? Whereas I have not dwelt in any house since the time that I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt, even to this day, but have walked in the tent and in the tabernacle. In all the places wherein I have walked with all the children of Israel, spake I a word with any of the tribes of Israel, whom I commanded to feed my people of Israel, saying, why build ye not a house of cedar? Another translation says, should you build me a house to dwell in? From the beginning, God says, I've not dwelt in a house. Rather, I've been moving. I was walking. I walked about in a tent. Not one time have I commanded you to build me a house. And of course, we just came off of Christmas. And we still have the Christmas tree up, and we still kind of have that afterglow. I love the gifts that my children give me. It comes from the heart, but I don't need their gifts. The ties I get, the socks I get, that's great, but I don't need those. If I want a pair of socks, I just go buy a 20-pack from the store. I can go get what I need. I don't need my kids to bring me to buy me things. But of course, it's not about what I get from them. It's like as the saying is, it's not about presence, but their physical presence with me. It's about that time that I have with them. And I'm sure Solomon's temple was grand. It was great. But to God, it was more important to be with his people. A tabernacle, a tent, it followed the people. The people took it with them. Back in Numbers, it was the pillar of smoke and the column of smoke and the pillar of fire. I probably got that mixed up. But, God's Spirit moved, and they picked up that tent, they brought that ark with them wherever they went. Wherever the Spirit led them, they had it. So it was something where God was with them. But yet, in a temple, it was a fixed place. It was this one place where the Spirit of God existed. So it no longer was something where he was with his people. It was now where the people came to him. It's now where a people went to God instead of God with his people. And God says, should you build me a house? Should you put God in a box? Should you just see God on Sunday morning or Sunday night? Should you just be a part of seek after God? Should we pray to God on prayer services, but not anywhere else in our life? Of course, this is not God's intent. God's intent was always to be with his people. And of course, we know in the New Testament and God's revelation that we are the temple. We are the tabernacle. With the Acts 2 experience, God infills us with his Spirit. In 1 Corinthians 3:16, Paul says, know ye not that you are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. It is the literal Spirit of God that dwells in us. If we truly understood the gravity of what this means, I feel like sin would be better understood. If I came into your house with mud boots and tracked mud throughout your house, crashed it, and then I just walked through the house and just brought all that dirt in from the outside, I'm sure that there's going to be a conversation. You know what? You're going to need to leave these mud boots outside. You're going to have to dust your shoes off. You're going to have to, this is my house. This is my home. I keep it clean, and you have to respect that. And of course, if I didn't honor that, that would probably be the last time that you would invite me to your house. When we understand that it is God himself that dwells in us, we understand sin becomes a little bit different mindset. In this point, I'm not going to pollute the house of God. I'm not going to pollute my body, my inner being, where I worship, where I sacrifice, where my altar of incense resides, where the table of showbed resides, where everything that God dwells that is within me. I'm not going to pollute that. I'm going to keep it clean. It's the sacrifices I make. It's all inside me. Peter says in chapter 1, verse 15 through 16, but as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation, because it is written, be ye holy, I am holy. Now that Greek word is translated, it could be translated as speech, but there also encompasses other things. It also means your entire way of life. It also means how you conduct yourself. So when Peter says, be holy in all manner of conversation, it's not just speak holy things. It's going to be the way you act, the way your character that you have, the way you live your life, the conduct you have. Is that where we need to keep it holy? Of course, because that's where God resides in us. And of course, we are all on all levels of spiritual maturity, and God empowers us to overcome. And we have unlimited forgiveness of sin. Yet the command still stands, be ye holy, for I am holy. And back to Solomon, at the dedication of the temple, we have the Shekinah glory fall in 2 Chronicles 7:1. Now when Solomon had made an end of praying, this is at the dedication of the temple, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. As a foreshadow of the Acts 2 experience, we had the fire fall from heaven, and the glory filled the house. Again, not just a part, not just a room. It was an infilling. It filled every part of that house. Yet, as a part of this, God takes Solomon aside. And now there are only two times where God speaks to Solomon directly. And this is one of those times. In 2 Corinthians 7:16 through 20. For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, that my name shall be there forever, and mine eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually forever. And as for thee, if thou wilt walk before me as David thy father walked, and do according to all that I have commanded thee, and shall observe my statutes and my judgments, then will I establish the throne of thy kingdom according as I have covenanted with David thy father, saying, there shall not fall thee a man to be a ruler in Israel. But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and shall go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will pluck them up by the roots of my land, which I have given thee, in this house which I have sanctified for my name. And I will cast out my sight, and I will make it to be a proverb and a byword among all nations. When you read this, I want you to read this for you. I have chosen you. I have consecrated you, so that my name will be with you forever. My eyes and my heart will always be with you. It's a beautiful promise that we have. Yet, as Paul says, God is not mocked. There is a command to walk as David walked, to do what the Lord commands, to keep the words of God and do them. But if you turn away, if you abandon my statutes, if you abandon my commandments and serve other gods and worship them, God will pluck you, uproot you, almost like a weed. He will pull you from the land that God has given you. And when you look at it, and you look at this covenant, God is saying here, I will always, I will forever. You know, the abandonment is not from God. It's with us. It's not God leaving us. It's us leaving God. When we abandon him, the covenant is broken. Yet God always has the rescue plan. And a very familiar verse, 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and will heal their land. If you look at this chain, if you dissect this chain, your life, your land is healed by God's forgiveness of sin. If, only if, you can first humble yourself. You can't do it all by yourself. You have to let go. You have to let God be God. You have to seek God's face in prayer and turn away from wickedness. And when that happens, we have unlimited grace and forgiveness. Now, you would say, but Chris, turning from sin, I mean, that's a work. You know, we're not saved by works. You know, God's grace is we're saved by grace. That's true. That's very true. But if I told you that I had $100,000 that I want to give you, but you have to meet me at the bank Monday morning to get it. Now, you can say that it was my grace that gave you that gave you that. You know, you did nothing to deserve it. You did nothing to deserve the money I'm going to give you. I want to give it to you. That's my grace to you. But you have to meet me at the bank. You have to do something to receive it. And of course, what we're seeing here is that it's not just a coming to God, it's also a turning away. a turning away from wickedness. It's going away from the part that causes you to be plucked up. And of course, we know Solomon's fall. Back to the statutes and commandments, Deuteronomy 7, 3 through 4. This is a commandment from the Torah. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. And this is of foreign nations. For they shall turn away thy son from following me, and they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you and destroy thee suddenly. So the commandment was not to intermix with the heathen nations, not to marry those. Now you can interact with them. You can, you can share everything that God has for you, but you are not to be entwined with them. And of course, it's not about them. It's not a commandment to say that they're bad. It says that if you get entwined with someone, that they're going to take you away from me. It's a coming away from God, not a coming away from a heathen, other people. There was a command not to intermarriage, not to be married with the foreign princesses, not to be unequally yoked. And here, the wisest man in the world in history chooses 700 wives and 300 concubines. Now, I can imagine one mother-in-law. You can imagine 700. That's a big task. Not very wise there, Solomon. But 1 Kings 11, 3 through 4. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. And his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. And his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God. Another way for perfect, it's not solely devoted to the Lord his God, and as was the heart of David, his father. And we can look at Solomon, who was weak in the flesh, and I would say likely a good portion of the marriages, and the Bible would tell you that a lot of these marriages were political. Instead of war, in Solomon's time, it was a time of peace. There was not a lot of war that was going on. But so a lot of the political machinations and things that they were cemented with marriages and not with war. It was a way to gain resources. It was a way to get people on your side. It could be it was a cleaner resolution to the problem. So perhaps Solomon was doing this for a good outcome. It was again coming from a good place. I'm just going to marry this foreign princess and we're going to increase the resources that we have as the people of God. And, instead of putting my people at risk for a fight, I'm going to marry this person, and this is how it's going to be. But, and I can tell you, when I woke up this morning, I'm trying to be apologetic to Solomon, but honestly, it's weakness. And when I look at Solomon, it's weakness. This is a man that, David never compromised his kingdom with another nation. It was war. It was fight. This was Solomon that was running away from a fight. If I could just marry this person, then we won't have to fight. And again, this was a 700 wives, 300 concubines. This was a fleshly appetite that never was able to be satisfied. And it makes me think about Ecclesiastes, which he is supposedly the writer of Ecclesiastes. That's the tradition of it. But Ecclesiastes 6:7 says, all the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the appetite is not filled. You understand, everything we pursue in this world, it's not going to satisfy. It's not going to fulfill. I can imagine, I don't know how many wives it would take for someone to be satisfied, but surely it's not 700. And you can see where even with Solomon, it was not even that. It wasn't on top of the marriages that he had. He even had kind of the people on the side that he had to satisfy. But with all that gain, all that, it was something where he was never satisfied. There's always more. There's probably that next foreign princess. There's always that next thing. And that was the thing about the world, is that when you go after the labor of man, everything we pursue in this world, it's not going to satisfy. You can continue to you can buy the bigger car, you can buy the bigger house. Christmas, my kids, they just got a probably half a room full of presents. And it's probably going to last about a week. I think after a week, they're going to say, you know what? I want that toy. You know, it's never it never satisfies. There's always more. There's always something more. Your appetite will never be filled with the things of this world. But more importantly, with Solomon, he was compromising the word of God. You know, and you know, maybe an older Solomon seeking peace in his household, he began to follow other gods. And the compromises he made, it began to affect his heart with God. I think the saddest thing that I read on this is that in another verse it says that the Bible records that he doesn't follow the Lord fully. So this was a man that didn't not follow God. You know, he was still the king of the Israelites. He probably still did temple duties. It was not a situation where he turned his back on God. It was a situation where he allowed other gods to come into his life. He allowed other idols. He allowed other things where he allowed the high places to be set up for other gods. So, you know, granted, he had his temple. He had the temple. And that was where the God of Yahweh resides, and that was where all that worship occurred. But he allowed other parts to have other worship. You know, again, he still kept the temple pure. I'm sure that there was no idol inside that temple, but it was in the high places. It was something where in the periphery of his life that Solomon followed after those other gods. And it wasn't Solomon turning away from God. It was not following the Lord fully. Again, he was a believer, and he did everything in the temple that he should have. But there was a lack of focused devotion, and in the addition of idols in his life. This echoes to me in the church of Laodicea, Revelation 3:13 through 17. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would not work cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Because thou sayest, I am rich and increase with goods and have need of nothing, and knowest that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. Jesus says to the church of Laodicea, you are neither hot or cold, you are lukewarm. Now, what's interesting thing about lukewarm water is comfortable. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's comfortable. That's exactly, when you go take a bath, that's exactly what you want. You want it to be lukewarm. You want to be in the place where you sit down and you relax. You stay comfortable. And like the Solomon, the Laodicean church was rich. You know, they were materially blessed by God, but yet they allowed their affluence to blind them to their spiritual poverty. I can't remember the name of it was a missionary that we had in my recesses of my brain to Mexico. And he was saying how, you know, why don't we have the revival, you know, in North America that we have in other nations? And he says, because we have it too good. You understand, in third world nations, your next meal is solely dependent upon God. The tribe that you know, the Muslim tribe that was going to come kill you, your protection was solely based on God's protection. You know, you are totally devoted. You're putting your total faith and trust in God. Whereas in North America, we have these God substitutes. You know, you're never going to go hungry in North America. There's always going to be somewhere to go. You know, the government's going to be able to take care of this. They're going to be able to take care of that. You know, there are things in place where, you know, your sole reliance doesn't have to be there. And he says that's why revival doesn't happen in North America, because there's a lack of trust in God. Again, the Laodicean church was rich, and they allowed that affluence to blind them to their lack of need of God. When God ceases to become a need in your life, it allows the footholds of compromise in your life. Solomon sought to please the people in his life over God. Again, Solomon, you know, he's married. He's got to please his wife. You know, we have commandments. We have responsibilities to please our spouse. And then Solomon was doing these things to please his spouses. But he chose his spouse over God. He chose the people in his life. He chose the values. He valued the relationship more than the value of the relationship with God. And I think, I've been thinking about 2026 for me. And for me, it's going to be an absolute total reliance on God. We need God now more than ever. And as the song says, nothing else will do. I just want you. I've been dwelling on the story of Mary and Martha in Luke 10:38 through 42. Now it came to pass, as they went, that they entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about much serving, and came to him and said, Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath let me serve alone? Bid her therefore that she may help me. Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Not one person was doing wrong in this story. Martha invited Jesus into her home. She was entertaining. She was making preparations. She got her Christmas tree just right. She put out the finest china for the Lord, but she was distracted by all her preparations. She neglected her time with Christ herself. The reason for the preparation was for Christ, and she was stuck being distracted with the things rather than taking advantage of the time that she had with him. Jesus' response from 2,000 years ago can be said for the same for today. Martha, Martha, you worry about so many things. Martha, Martha, you are distracted by many things. There are a few things in this life that are truly needed. In fact, there is one thing that is needed, and Mary have chosen the better part of this life, sitting at the feet of Jesus. Not to diminish serving, because it's something we have to do, but sometimes the dishes can wait. To prioritize our time with Christ, to prioritize our time with him. I want God to give us everything we need and the strength to endure to go without. Let God take away everything we don't need, and whatever we don't need, let God give us the strength to endure that. Jesus said it's that part in his presence can never be taken away from her. Understand, you can lose your house. You can lose your car. You can even lose your family. Everything in this life that you value can be lost. But there's a good part. There's a part that can never be taken away from you, and that's our time with Jesus. It's that experience with God, is being at his feet, that time with our Savior. Solomon's wavering was due to his heart not wholly devoted to God. He did not follow the Lord fully. The core of who we are is found when Jesus quotes the Shema. In Deuteronomy 6:4-5, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in your heart. Loving the Lord with your heart, loving the Lord with your whole soul, loving the Lord with all your strength. This is the core of who we are. This is the thing that we need to prioritize. That, again, we can't be distracted by the things around us. We can't be worried about things that we have no control over. We can only control our time with Jesus. We can only control our time with him. And Jesus says, when they ask him, what is the first and greatest commandment? Jesus says, this is it. This is number one. This is the first. This is the greatest commandment. To love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. If Solomon was fully devoted and loved the Lord with all his heart, then the idols would never be able to exist. He would never allow that part in his life, because everything was given to God. If Martha had fully devoted herself to Jesus, again, the dishes can wait. Sometimes, we look at things and it was Mary that sat at the feet of Jesus. It was Mary that was there and took advantage of that time with him, because she was loving him with her whole heart, with her whole soul, with all her might. And again, Jesus says, this is the first and greatest commandment. This is the number one, and of course, the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. But the first thing, before you can love another person, before you can love your spouse, where you can love everything else you value in your life. The first love that you have is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might.